Picture this: Washington, D.C. August 28, 1963. It's blazing hot. Over 250,000 people are standing shoulder to shoulder, packed along the National Mall, all the way from the Lincoln Memorial to the Washington Monument. Some walked miles to get there. Some rode buses through the night. Some risked their jobs, their safety, their lives. And they all came for one reason: to be heard. Music swells slightly. What happened that day didn't just make headlines. It rewired the conscience of a nation. This is the story of the most powerful speech ever delivered on American soil. To understand why that day mattered so much, you have to understand what life looked like before it. In 1963, racial segregation wasn't just a social problem, it was written into law. Black Americans couldn't eat at the same lunch counters as white Americans. They couldn't drink from the same water fountains. They couldn't attend the same schools. In many southern states, they couldn't even vote. And if you dared to protest, you risked getting beaten, arrested, or worse. Birmingham, Alabama, just months before the march, had become a symbol of that brutality. Civil rights demonstrators, many of them children, were met with fire hoses and police dogs. The images shocked the world. America was at a boiling point. And in the middle of all of it stood a 34-year-old Baptist preacher from Atlanta, Georgia, a man who had already been stabbed, bombed, and jailed, and who still believed, against all odds, that love could win. His name was Martin Luther King Jr. The March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom wasn't just Martin Luther King's idea. It was a coalition, a massive organized movement of civil rights leaders, labor unions, and everyday people who had simply had enough. The goal: to pressure the United States government to pass meaningful civil rights legislation. President John F. Kennedy was nervous about it. He worried the march could turn violent and hurt the movement politically. He tried to discourage it. It happened anyway. On the morning of August 28th, people poured into Washington from every corner of the country. Black, white, young, old. They came carrying signs, singing hymns, and holding on to something that no law could take away from them. Hope. By the time the sun reached its peak, the crowd had swelled to 250,000 people. It was the largest political demonstration America had ever seen. And one by one, leaders stepped up to speak. But everyone was waiting for one voice. Martin Luther King Jr. took the stage near the end of the program. He had prepared a speech, a good speech, a careful, structured, political speech focused on jobs, on legislation, on the hard machinery of change. He began reading it, and then something shifted. Gospel singer Mahalia Jackson, standing just behind him, called out loud enough for him to hear, "Tell them about the dream, Martin." King paused. He pushed his notes aside, and he started to preach. What came next was not just a speech. It was a vision, a declaration, a promise spoken out loud into the open sky of America. He talked about a nation drowning in injustice, and the urgency to cash a check that had been promised to every American but denied to millions. He talked about going back to the South, back to the struggle, not with bitterness, but with dignity. He talked about not giving up. And then he said it: "I have a dream." He dreamed of a day when his 4 little children would be judged not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. He dreamed of former slaves and former slave owners sitting together at the table of brotherhood. He dreamed of the crooked places being made straight, of mountains being brought low, and valleys being lifted up. He dreamed of freedom ringing from every mountainside, every city, every corner of this land. And when he finished, 17 minutes after he began, 250,000 people erupted. Not just in applause, in belief. The world listened. Television networks broadcast the march to millions of homes across America. Newspapers ran the speech on their front pages the next morning. World leaders took note. President Kennedy watched it from the White House. Afterward, he met with the march's leaders and reportedly told King, "I have a dream." A quiet acknowledgement that the moment had landed. Less than a year later, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was signed into law, banning discrimination based on race, color, religion, or national origin. The following year, the Voting Rights Act of 1965 followed, protecting the right of Black Americans to vote. None of that was inevitable. None of it was easy. And none of it happened in a straight line. Martin Luther King would be assassinated just 5 years later, in April of 1968, on a motel balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. He was 39 years old. He never got to see the full harvest of what he planted. But here's what he understood that many people miss. Change doesn't wait for perfect conditions. It doesn't wait for permission. It doesn't wait for the right moment. It starts with someone willing to stand up and say out loud, in public, no matter the cost, "This is not good enough." And I believe we can do better. Here's what I want you to take away from this story. Martin Luther King didn't change the world because he was perfect. He changed it because he was persistent. He was afraid. He was tired. He was threatened constantly, and he kept going. He understood something that history has proven true over and over again. Movements don't start in government buildings. They start in the hearts of ordinary people who refuse to accept that the world can't be better. The "I Have a Dream" speech wasn't just about race. It was about the radical idea that every single human being deserves dignity. That freedom isn't a privilege for the few, it's a birthright for all. That dream didn't die in 1968. It lives every time someone chooses courage over comfort. Every time someone stands up for someone who can't stand up for themselves. Every time a person looks at an unjust world and says, "Not on my watch." The dream is still being built. And every generation has to pick up the tools and keep building. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of what's possible when ordinary people dare to believe in something bigger than themselves, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it today. And if you want more stories like this, real history told the way it deserves to be told, subscribe. Because we've got a lot more coming. Until next time, keep dreaming, keep building, keep going.